stop for a moment, look around you. Chances are there's one in this very room right now. Maybe two. It's watching you with 5 eyes. It processes the world 4 times faster than you do. And if you decided to catch it, you would fail. Not because of any clumsiness on your part, but because it already calculated your move before your brain finished forming it. The fly. That word we say with contempt actually refers to one of the most extraordinary creatures ever to walk this planet. And I say walk deliberately, because flies were already crawling over the earth when tyrannosaurs hunted in packs. They were there when the asteroid hit. They watched the dinosaurs die. They laid eggs in their carcasses, and they kept flying. Today I want to tell you the story of this survivor, a story that begins with disgust and ends, I hope, with something resembling respect. When someone says fly, most of us picture the same thing, that gray insect buzzing over the dinner plate. But that image is as limited as saying bird and picturing only a pigeon. Flies belong to the order Diptera, one of the oldest groups of insects on the planet. Science has described around 160,000 species, though entomologists suspect this is barely a fraction of the true total. Every year, dozens of new species emerge from jungles, caves, and even urban basements. Among them are hunters that tear prey apart in mid-flight. There are flies whose larvae splash around contentedly in crude oil. There are pollinators without whom entire plant families would not exist. And there are adult species that don't even eat. They're born, reproduce, and die within days. The size range defies imagination. From mosquitoes barely a millimeter long to the South American Goromidas harrows with a wingspan of 12 centimeters. 12. That's no longer an insect you swat with a newspaper. That's something you step away from. And they live everywhere. Arctic tundra, tropical swamps, deserts, alpine peaks, oil puddles. Wherever there is organic matter, there are flies. Take any fly. The common housefly, the one right now somewhere in your home. Examine it under a microscope, and you'll discover a piece of biological engineering that would shame Silicon Valley. Its compound eyes are made up of thousands of facets, each capturing a slice of space. Together they compose an almost panoramic vision, 360 degrees horizontally. The fly sees what's happening in front, behind, above, and to the sides, simultaneously. Surprising it in the strict sense is impossible. On top of its head, it also carries 3 ocelli, sensors that detect polarized and ultraviolet light. They don't form images, but they tell it the position of the sun even on cloudy days. 5 eyes in total, working in parallel. But what's truly impressive isn't what it sees, it's the speed at which it processes. Its brain operates roughly 4 times faster than the human brain. What seems like a fast swat to you unfolds in slow motion for the fly. It sees you coming, calculates your trajectory, decides on an escape route, and takes off. All in a fraction of a second that your nervous system doesn't even register as an event. Its name, Diptera, means 2 wings. The rear wings transformed millions of years ago into small club-shaped appendages called halteres. They vibrate during flight and function as biological gyroscopes. Thanks to them, the fly can hover in mid-air, fly backwards, change direction without transition. That buzzing that annoys us so much doesn't come from the wings. It's produced by the halteres. The legs are another marvel. 6 limbs equipped with claws and adhesive pads, covered in microscopic hairs that secrete a sticky substance. That's how it walks on the ceiling. And in those same legs reside its taste receptors. When it lands on your food, it doesn't taste it with its mouth, it analyzes it with its feet. It knows in an instant whether something is edible, acidic, sweet, or toxic. What impressed me most while researching this topic was a small detail. The fly starts tensing its takeoff muscles before it has decided which direction to flee. It anticipates, it predicts. In a human being, we would call that intuition. But everything that makes the fly a perfect machine, its omnivorism, its ubiquity, its reproductive speed, also makes it one of the most efficient disease vectors that has ever existed. The housefly doesn't bite or inject venom. It simply lands, but its body is covered in microscopic bristles to which everything it has touched clings. And before landing on your bread, it has almost certainly been in garbage, excrement, decomposing matter. On the legs of a single specimen, bacteria have been identified that cause typhoid fever, dysentery, tuberculosis, cholera, and salmonella. It doesn't get sick, it just carries. There are even more fearsome species. The African tsetse fly carries trypanosomes in its proboscis, the parasites that cause sleeping sickness, fever, disrupted sleep, mental confusion, convulsions, coma, and death. During the 20th century, it claimed nearly 3 million lives. Curiously, the tsetse doesn't attack zebras. The black and white pattern disorients its visual system, preventing it from calculating where to land. That's why zebras graze calmly where other mammals risk their lives. There's also the wolfart fly, almost identical to the housefly. But this one doesn't lay eggs in garbage. It deposits them directly in open wounds, ears, nasal passages. The larvae feed on living tissue. It lives in southern Europe, and, with climate change, its range is shifting northward. There are already isolated records in Crimea and the Caucasian coast of the Black Sea. Napoleon didn't lose in Russia because of the winter. He was defeated by the fly. That sounds exaggerated, but it's medical statistics. Of the 600,000 soldiers of the Grande Armée who crossed the Russian border in 1812, far more died from disease than in combat. Dysentery, typhus, intestinal infections, all transmitted through contaminated water and food. The main vector, flies. The army advanced, left behind mountains of waste and corpses, and the insects did the rest. By the time the retreat from Moscow came, the troops were already broken. The cold merely finished the job. The same happened in the American Civil War, where disease killed twice as many soldiers as bullets, and in the First World War. In the era before antibiotics, the fly was an invisible weapon that made no distinction between flags. Humanity declared war on it. In the late 19th century, some American cities paid children per 100 insects killed. Useless. They reproduced faster than they could be exterminated. By the mid-20th century, DDT arrived, that insecticide sprayed across entire fields of the planet. Yes, flies declined, but birds, fish, and bees disappeared too. The price was so high that the substance ended up banned in most of the world. The flies naturally survived. The most ingenious victory came in Africa. Scientists discovered that Tsetse males were attracted to the color blue. They began capturing them, sterilizing them with radiation, and releasing them. Females mated with sterile males and laid eggs that never hatched. In certain areas, the population collapsed, a victory won through cunning. Here the story turns. Because the same fly that has made us sick for millennia is also one of the creatures that most silently sustains life on Earth. Start with the most basic, decomposition. Fly larvae are one of the planet's main engines for recycling organic matter. When an animal dies, first flies arrive within minutes. A female can lay eggs 20 minutes after the last heartbeat. Hundreds of larvae decompose a medium-sized carcass within days. Without this mechanism, forests would choke under their own remains. Then there's pollination. Most people picture bees when they think of pollinators, but flies are the second most important globally. They pollinate more than 100 crop species: carrot, onion, parsley, dill, buckwheat. Some plants are pollinated exclusively by flies because their flowers were designed so that no other insect can access them. And then comes chocolate. This is not a metaphor. Cacao depends on tiny midges of the genus Forsythia. It has almost no other pollinators. Every attempt to grow cacao in greenhouses or in regions without these flies has failed. The flowers remain sterile. Every bar of chocolate you've ever eaten exists because, somewhere in a corner of a tropical forest, a microscopic fly did its job. Flies are also a critical link in food chains. Fish, frogs, lizards, hedgehogs, moles, and birds feed on their larvae. Dragonflies, spiders, swallows, and swifts live on the adults. Remove flies from a temperate ecosystem and that entire web begins to unravel. Not all at once, but inevitably. Biologists call it cascade collapse. And now for the most unlikely twist. During the Middle Ages, surgeons observed an anomaly. Wounds in which fly larvae appeared, against all logic, healed. They didn't become infected. They didn't fester. They scarred better than clean wounds. The explanation came in the 20th century. The larvae feed exclusively on dead tissue, without touching the living. And they secrete substances with antibacterial properties. In practice, they clean the wound and create an environment hostile to pathogens. During both world wars, field surgeons without antiseptics deliberately allowed flies to lay eggs in severe wounds. Repulsive, but it worked. When antibiotics seemed to solve everything, bacteria learned to resist them faster than the industry could manufacture new ones, and larval therapy returned. Today, it is officially applied in Western clinics to treat diabetic ulcers, chronic wounds, and post-surgical complications. It's not an eccentricity, it's evidence-based medicine. Flies also assist forensic science. Forensic entomology determines time of death by studying the insects found on a body. Different species arrive at the corpse in a precise sequence, dependent on temperature and season. By knowing which species are present and at what larval stage, an entomologist can establish the time of death within a margin of a few hours. More than one crime has been solved this way. And there is the black soldier fly, whose larvae process tons of organic waste within days. In several countries, there are already industrial farms that use them to recycle garbage. The output is compost and animal protein. While we invent technologies to manage waste, flies have been doing it for 100 million years. In the early 20th century, biologist Thomas H. Morgan chose a tiny fly as his experimental subject, Drosophila melanogaster, the fruit fly. Small, easy to breed, it reproduces every 2 weeks and lays up to 100 eggs per clutch. Within a few months, hundreds of generations can be obtained, equivalent to millennia of breeding with mice. Morgan discovered in it the principle of sex-linked inheritance and demonstrated the chromosomal theory of heredity. Nobel Prize, 1933. But that was only the beginning. In 2001, the complete Drosophila genome was sequenced, and scientists found something unexpected. Nearly 70% of human genes associated with disease have counterparts in this fly. Cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart conditions, all can be studied in a creature that lives 3 weeks and fits in a matchbox. And there is one detail I had to verify several times before believing it. Flies traveled to space before humans did. In February 1947, a group of Drosophila was launched aboard an American V-2 rocket from New Mexico. They reached an altitude of 109 kilometers above the Kármán line and returned alive. It was our species' first biological victory in space. It was achieved by an insect most of us consider a kitchen pest. Imagine for a moment that they disappear. Not all 160,000 species, only those that fulfill ecological functions in our climate. The first consequences would arrive within weeks. Courses would stop decomposing at their usual rate. Forests and fields would begin to accumulate organic matter. An odor would appear that we don't notice today, because an invisible army of larvae constantly eliminates it. Within the first season, pollinators would begin to suffer. Plants dependent on flies would stop bearing fruit. Agricultural losses would be small in the first year, greater in the second, devastating by the fifth. Birds that feed on larvae would seek substitutes. Some wouldn't find them. After them would fall the predators that feed on birds. Chocolate would disappear from mass production within a few years. Not for lack of demand, but because there would be nothing left to pollinate cacao, science would lose one of its main experimental models. Medicine would lose a therapy that works where antibiotics fail. Forensic science would lose a fundamental forensic tool. Dozens of crimes that are solved today would go unanswered. This is not ecological rhetoric. It is the logic of the interdependencies that evolution has woven over 70 million years. 4 decades ago, the great entomologist Edward O. Wilson wrote something to roughly this effect. If all vertebrates disappeared, fish, birds, mammals, reptiles, ecosystems would recover within some tens of thousands of years. If insects disappeared, almost all ecosystems would collapse within a few years, and the planet would be unrecognizable. Insects are not the decoration of life on Earth. They are its load-bearing structure, and flies are one of its oldest, most numerous, most irreplaceable pillars. Our disgust toward them is an honest evolutionary response. We feel revulsion toward everything associated with decomposition because that, for millennia, saved us from disease. The instinct works, and there's no reason to suppress it. But understanding is another thing. Knowing exactly what the fly does, why it's here, what role it plays, doesn't mean you stop shooing it away when it lands on your bread. It simply means you stop underestimating it. The next time a fly hovers over your table, you have every right to shoo it away. It's reasonable. But perhaps somewhere in a corner of your mind, a different intuition will appear. The awareness of exactly who you're dealing with. A creature that has been in this world 60 million years longer than humanity. That has survived everything that tried to destroy it. And that at this very moment as we speak, is silently doing for this planet a job no one else will do in its place. When we are gone, and we will go because every species eventually goes, it will still be buzzing over something, landing, calculating, flying, without knowing or needing to know that a primate once hated it.